continue. Now, this part we begin our edition and I'm going to tackle the last topic. That is the last three topics. We have the inflation and unemployment. Then I will also talk about the international trade, and then we'll also be able to talk about the economic growth and development. In this case, we just going to base on some of the questions that were tested from that regard. So we first have to begin with the area for unemployment. Going to begin with the area for unemployment. Unemployment. Now, for the unemployment, in this case, when you talk about unemployment, this is whereby the factors of production are willing, but they are capable of being employed, but they are not being in what? They are not being in use. Are we together? The factors of production we're talking about here is labor. Typically, sasa tukisema unemployment ni kumaanisha you are not employed only. Also, in this case also there is an employment of resources. And the resources that we're talking about in this case cannot only be on labor, but also we can talk about the what? You may have what we call in the other factor like what? The capital. That's how. So generally, however, for unemployment we normally base on the labor. We normally base on what we call the labor. And what you need to know in this case is the types of unemployment. Types of unemployment. Types of unemployment. Types of unemployment. The types of unemployment. Now, for the types of unemployment, number one, and this is from the 16th of November 2020. November 2020. That is November 2020, question number 4B. Question 4B. When you take on November 2020, question 4B, you are required to differentiate between the seasonal unemployment and then we also have what we call the frictional unemployment. Now, in this case, when we talk about the seasonal unemployment, this is the unemployment that is caused by the seasonal annual valuation of that, which is caused by the annual valuation of seasons. Seasonal unemployment. So you can wait and say seasonal unemployment. Wait and say seasonal unemployment. Say this is caused by annual variations. Seasonal unemployment. This is caused by annual variations of seasons which affect the economic activities, such as agriculture or tourism, this, when we talk about the agriculture, this one we are lecturing on the workers, those the farmers. Now for the farmers in this case, wanapata kazi lini? Ile time kuna mvua. That is when they are going to plant for those crops. But after that season ends, they will be rendered jobless. And that is what we mean. Also for the tourism. Now, like for example, in this case, for the Easter auditing, I don't know what one I but how was the situation on that case? Or generally, you have to look on these areas that you normally visit. Kama tunaitwa is it this one in Naivasha? Naitwa this one ni unaendai kama kuna mvua. So in that case, that is what we mean in this case. So that is what we mean when we talk about the seasonal unemployment. The second one is asking about the frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment, and you say frictional unemployment, and you say This arises from immobility. This arises from immobility of labor force rather than the lack of demand for labor. This arises from immobility of labor force. This arises from immobility of labor force rather than the lack of demand for labor. The lack of demand for labor rather than the lack of demand for labor. So what we mean in this case, this happens when there is changing in jobs. Also, kama ni job una change. It doesn't mean that immediately you are shifting from this job to the other job immediately. So as at the time that you are now changing for that other job, ni kumaanisha kuna time utaenda kufanya kazi, ndio? Yes. And as a result of that, that time that now you are going to be free, you tunasema is unemployment because you are not employed. Out of the change of the job. And that is what we call the frictional unemployment. Now, still there is this other question in the sitting of May 2019. May 2019 question 5A. May 2019, and that is question 5A. May 2019 question 5A. Now on May 2019 question 5A, May 2019 question 5A, you are required to differentiate between demand deficiency unemployment, and then we also have the disguised unemployment. This is also another type of unemployment. We call it the demand deficient unemployment. Demand deficient unemployment. So you write and say demand deficient and unemployment. Demand deficient unemployment is the situation whereby there is no demand for products. There is no demand for products produced in a certain type of labor. There is no demand for products produced by a certain type of labor. That product produced by a certain type of labor. That is what we mean when we talk of demand deficient. So what we mean in this case, you may produce some of particular products in a given type of labor, and at the end of it, there will not be what? Demand for that. That's how. So if there is no demand for those products that you have produced, what will happen? You are not selling the products. So at the end of it, you will be rendered what? Unemployed or jobless. That is what we mean in that regard. Then we also have what we call the disguised unemployment. Disguised unemployment. You write and say, disguised unemployment. This occurs when work available to a given workforce is insufficient. These occurs when work available to a given workforce is insufficient. A given workforce is insufficient to keep it fully employment. To keep full employment, if it's full employment, so that some of the members of the workforce, could be withdrawn without loss of output. without loss of output. Be withdrawn without loss of output. Now, what do we mean in this case? The organization is still operating, but the workforce that is there is insufficient. So what we mean in this case, it is insufficient in that to keep a full employment of those other workers that are working in that organization. Therefore, as a result of that, at the end of it, some of the people will be rendered jobless or at a footwork. And then it means that even if those people are a footwork, the kumaanisha still the level of output will still be what? Maintained. There is not going to be loss on output. Now, then those are the difference between the demand deficient unemployment and also what we call the disguised unemployment. We also have what we call the staggered unemployment. Staggered unemployment. Now, when we talk about the staggered unemployment, this results from imbalance with the supply of a particular group of workers and also the demand of their services. What we mean in this case, it arises out of what we call the technological advancements. In technological advancement, in kumaanisha, some of the things that were done by people, they are being done using the what? Technology. So those people that they were doing those things manually, they are going to be rendered what? Jobless. And that is now what we call the structured unemployment. Then we also have what we call the cyclical, from the last cycle, cyclical unemployment. Cyclical unemployment. Cyclical unemployment. So cyclical unemployment, this one is associated with what we call the trade cycle. Trade cycles. Now, in this case, there is what we call the periods of depression. There is also periods of what? There is also a period of what we call recession. Are we together? There is also periods of what? Yeah? We don't trade cycle. Are you sure? We've not talked about the trade cycle. Yeah? We've not talked about the trade cycle. You're very sure. Then we've not talked about the trade cycle. Now, when we talk about the trade cycle, there are 4 periods. There is a period we call a period of boom. There is a period of recession. There is also a period of depression. And then a period of recovery. Also, there is a period of recovery. Now, in this case, when we talk about the periods of boom, this is whereby there is increased investment. Also, during the periods of increased investment. So, during the periods of increased investment, generally what will happen there? In this case, there will be what? Reduction in unemployment. Because investments in this case are increasing. Then we also have the periods of recession, or what we call it the what? Depression. During the period of depression, in this case, they are going to be reduced investments. Are we together? And as a result of reduced investment, what is going to happen in this case? They are going to be what? There is going to be what we call unemployment. Unemployment. And also in this case, as a result of unemployment, is what is resulting the unemployment is because of decreased income. Remember, in this case, during the periods of boom, there is increased investment to manage the incomes are also increasing. Awesome. And that is what we mean in this case. These are how the trade cycle, and this is how it looks like for trade cycle. So let's make a period of what? The period of boom, boom to you, that is booming. Then recession is inateremka, where now it is declining. That's how. Then when it has fully declined, that's how of like depression. That's why you don't like a period of what? Recover. That is now what we mean when we talk about the trade cycle. They are just a cyclical fluctuations, and this is on the regards to the level of economic what? Levels of economic activities. So that is what we mean in that case. So when we talk about the cyclical unemployment in this case is the one that is relating or associated with the trade cycle. So meaning that during the period of recovery, see there is it's just like booming, there is increased investment. That's how. And therefore, during this period of recovery, si watu wataajiriwa kama after corona, after now lockdown, watu wamerudi kazi. Now we are back to work. Come on, we still back on what we call it research. Yeah, ilikuwa tumeshaanza kuboom. That is okay, not booming, but it was recovered. But now in this case, as a result of this lockdown, the majority of people will lose what? Wamepoteza kazi. Ndio. Ndio this big organization. Sawa. Na inateremka tu hivyo. Usikie tu hapa. Ignore it completely. Are we together? And this is what happened in previous year. That is 2020. Our economy ilikuwa juu. The level of economic activity ilikuwa ina boom. It was booming. There was increased investment, and as a result of corona and hapo wakakuja na lockdown, tukaanza kufanya nini? So that is what we mean in this case when we talk about the cyclical unemployment. Now, then we also have what we call the voluntary unemployment. Now, this one will happen. Voluntary unemployment is will happen for those people that when you want to young well by their own work. These people will be unemployed because their fathers got money, and therefore they will say to themselves that they are not going to do work. So when you talk about the voluntary unemployment, this is whereby the people will choose not to work. They will choose not to work. And this one I've seen it is happening for the families who are well. Because kama baba yako alikuwa na pesa, why will you go and work? Senior. That is what we mean when we talk about the voluntary unemployment. So we also have what we call involuntary unemployment. Involuntary unemployment. Now, when you talk about the involuntary unemployment, in this case, the people are willing to work, but the only thing that is there, they are unable to get the job. They are willing to work, but they cannot find out. And that is now what is happening with the youth. They are willing to work. The only problem of the issue in that case is only that they are then we also technological unemployment. Now, the happening whereby in this case an organization may implement
imagine.
all machineries. Yeah, those
You take a bet on that?
are normally done using what? Those things that are normally done using what we call in the what we call in they are the things that were done manually. That's how in an organization. So if they implement what we call the plants and machineries, ni kumaanisha hizo hao watu wenye walikuwa wanafanya hiyo manual, they will be rendered what? Jobless. In that case, that is also what we call in unemployment. Then the other one, the last one, is also what we call the what? Partial unemployment. Partial unemployment. Partial unemployment. When we talk about the partial unemployment, this affects casual laborers who normally are hired on what we call the part-time services. Also, now if we talk about the part-time services in kumaanisha in this case kama for example in Mogusa hired in part-time wana work depending on hours. Ndio. Napata mtu anaambiwa this day you will work for how many hours? 3 hours. Ndio. The following day maybe you are not going to go to work. The other day unaambiwa you just go for the work for 2 hours. Ndio. The part-time workers or the those workers that are providing part-time services, still that is now what we call the casual unemployment because in this case they are not fully employed. That is what we mean when we talk about the casual unemployment. And the last one is what we call the general unemployment. General unemployment in this case is the one that is widespread in a given economy or given country. That case of growth that economy and it cannot be categorized within out of or it cannot be categorized from out of what we say in this case. That is now what we call the general unemployment. The general unemployment. And those are the types of unemployment. Now, the other question in this case, again, now, before we talk about the effects of unemployment, what may cause unemployment? What may cause the causes of unemployment? Causes of unemployment. Now, causes of unemployment in this case may be as a result of the following. Now, number one is what we call the what? The rapid population growth. Rapid population growth. Rapid population growth. So when we talk about the rapid population growth in this case is whereby the population is growing faster. And if in this case the population is growing faster, it means in this case, if the population grows, it doesn't mean that the types of works are still increasing. And as a result of that, the population growth in that case, some of the workers will be rendered what? Rapid population growth. Some of the workers will be rendered jobless, even for those people that are being born. Now, the other one is also the use of inappropriate technology. Use of inappropriate technology. When we talk about the use of inappropriate technology, in developing country, in this case, technology is always often for labor saving, and also when we talk about the labor saving, in this case, in that case, we normally talk of it as well, labor intensive, and also for what we call the capital intensive. That is in majority of the organization. And as a result of that, they may implement technology or use technology, which in that case is inappropriate for that case. The other one is also the nature of education systems. Nature of education systems. Education systems. The nature, the role, education systems. Now, in this case, for the education systems, when we talk about the education systems here, now, there are some of the areas in this case people do not measure on. Waangalia watu wenye wanasomea things that are relating to agriculture. Things that are related to agriculture. Utapata ni wachache. Are we together? Because in this case, they are measuring on those things that are related to business. They are measuring on those areas that are relating to what? Is the more of medicine and forgetting areas of what? Agriculture. Now, this is where we have in mind. So in that case, that will do mean in this regard. Then the other one also is also the seasonality. Seasonality in production. Seasonality in production. Seasonality in production. Now, when you talk about seasonality in production, in this case, there are some of areas, or generally for the agricultural areas, or the agricultural products. In this case, they are normally producing what? Seasons. Meaning that after a given season, it at the end of it will be rendered jobless. And then the last one is also what we call the what? Massive rural urban migration. Massive rural urban migration. Now, people have migrated from rural areas to urban areas. And as a result of that, that is why we are having a big majority of people here in Nairobi, where in this case, they are making it insufficient for the urban areas to create job opportunities. They are forgetting that in rural areas, especially in agriculture, there are more job opportunities. Yes, in rural areas, especially in agriculture, there are more job opportunities. Now, there is this question in the sitting of should be May 2018, question number May 2018, question number 7A. May 2018, question 7A. May 2018, question 7A. What to highlight 5 negative effects of unemployment in an economy. Negative effects are saying this is on May 2018. That is question number 7. Question 7A. The negative effects of unemployment. And negative effects of unemployment in this case. The negative effects of unemployment, number 1, it leads to high levels of poverty. High levels of poverty. High levels of poverty. High levels of poverty. Number 2, it will also lead to what we call in the what? It will also lead to high level of what? High level of drug abuse. High level of drug abuse. And also you can also add what we call the what? Social unrest. Social unrest. Social unrest. So in this case, majority of the people of those, for example, those consume drugs, if you look at those people, you find that most of the things that they lead them to the drug habits is lacking something to do during their own time. And therefore, as a result of being idle, in that case, they will indulge themselves into what we call in the world drug habits. Also, unemployment in this case will also lead to what we call what? The low economic growth and development. Low economic growth and development. Low economic growth and what we call the economic development. Economic growth and development. Now, in this case, remember these people are not participating in the economy. There is nothing that they are contributing towards the economy. And as a result of that, there will be low economic growth and development. Then the other one also, it will lead to what we call low living standards. Low living standards. These people will be in lack of housing, clothing, and as a result of that, these people will be having what we call in low living standards. Then the last one also, it will also lead to what we call what? Prostitution and social evils. Prostitution and social evils. Social evils. And those are the negative effects of unemployment, the negative effects of unemployment. That was the question for the sitting of May 2018, and that was question number 578. So that is on that area of unemployment. So we can get to the inflation, the rest of the area, or the rest of the thing that you need to understand on that case is measures on which an organization can use or a country can use in order to combat unemployment, which will be able to see them from the notes. And for those who are having the app, that is our KC College app, it will also help you in understanding more of some of the things that are still relating to the unemployment and some of other topics that we've been able to talk about in that case. So you can also, because in this case, we'll not be able to talk about each and every area during our revision. And there are some of the areas that are very critical. And as a result of that, I will advise you, just go to our KC College app, whereby you'll be able to find all these videos. We've recorded all these videos. Some of the questions we've already computed, whereby in that case, at least you can get that app as at now at 2,000 shillings only per unit. So in that case, you'll be able to internalize yourself with some of the questions that are still there. I mean, some of the other topics, because in this case, if we say we devise on each and every area, we'll not be able to finalize on it. So just go to the KC, that is the Google Play Store. You download the KC College app, and then in that case, you will be able to do what? After the downloading in that case, maybe you can contact me that via this number. That is 14166. From there, I will be able to assist you. 140714166318. You can contact via that number. I will be able to assist you in getting those other videos at only 2,000 shillings only. You'll be able to get more, each and every topic is there. From topic 1 up to topic 13, because in this case, remember, for the economics is a bit wide. There is inflation, we have also on the market structures, we have on the international trade, we still have on what we call the national income accounting, money and banking. We also have on introduction, up demand, supply. We also have consumer theory. We also have the theory of production. We still have what we call the theory of course, and also those many areas there. So for you I will advise you some of those areas. You may contact me via this number so that you may be able to get those topics or those units in that regard. So in that case, we can continue. There is someone who is asking, what is disguised unemployment? The disguised unemployment. Now, as I said in this case, when we talk about disguised unemployment, this is whereby the labor or the work that is available at a given workforce is insufficient. And therefore, if it is it is insufficient to keep full employment, and therefore, for the some of the members who are in that given workforce, they will be what? Rendered jobless as a result of what? Because what we mean in this case, the work that is there is insufficient. When we talk of insufficient, we mean it cannot keep full employment. It is insufficient. That is insufficient to keep full employment. So kumaanisha if it is not sufficient or is not sufficient to keep full employment, some of the workers at the end of it they will be what? Rendered what? They will be rendered jobless. And that is what we call in the disguise unemployment. Now let's get to inflation. We also check on some of the questions on regards to inflation. On regards to inflation. Regards to inflation. Inflation. On regards to inflation. Now, when we talk about inflation in this case, when we talk about inflation in this regard, now this is the rapid increase in price level, which is normally accompanied by what we call the loss in purchasing power. The increase in price levels, which is normally accompanied by what we call the loss in purchasing power. Now, in this case, we have five types of inflation. And on the types of inflation, number one, types of inflation. Number one, we have what we call the hyperinflation. The hyperinflation. This is a question in the sitting of May 2019. It should be May 2019. May 2019. Not May 2019, but November 2018. Question number November 2018. Question number 7A. November 2018. Question 7A. When you check on November 2017, question 7A, you are number one, you are required to explain the term hyperinflation. The term hyperinflation. Now, when we talk about the hyperinflation, this is whereby the prices rise at a phenomenal rate, where the inflation rate in this case surpasses 3 digits level. What we mean when we talk about 3 digits level? The inflation rate in this case goes above what? Above 1,000. That is the price level. The prices rises at a nominal rate, whereby in this case it surpasses the 3 digits level. And that is what we call the hyperinflation. Now, number two, we also have what we call the suppressed inflation. The suppressed inflation. Now, when we talk about the suppressed inflation, this is demand whereby the demand exceeds supply, but the effect of price are minimized through what we call the price control. The demand in this case will exceed, is greater than the supply, but now the effect in this case is minimized through what we call the price control. The price controls, remember in this case, we say is a deliberate act by the government to set prices. Whereby in those cases, we say that the flat prices. So at the end of it, the demand will not be equal to supply. And as a result of that, this one will now be minimized through what we call the price control. Then number three, we also have what we call the creeping inflation. The creeping inflation. Creeping inflation. Now, when you talk about the creeping inflation, this occurs where when prices and wages push one another upward, causing a continuous increase in supply of what? Causing a continuous increase in supply of money. That is wages and prices are increasing continuously, which in that case they increase the supply of what? Supply of money. That is generally the money supply. The money supply. Then number four, we also have what we call the rapid inflation. When in this case we talk about the rapid inflation, this is the one that occurs whereby the prices are at a rate that is very small, and definitely the prices in this case can be what? Easily controlled. The rate in this case is very low. Rates of inflation are low, very low. And also in this case, they can be what? They can be minimums. They can be minimums. Now, then the other one is what we call the moderate inflation. Now, moderate inflation in this case is whereby the rates of inflation, they are not high or low, they are just moderate. They are just moderate. That is what we mean in this regard when we talk about the moderate inflation. Now, on the same question of the November 2018, question 7A Roman 2. November 2018. November 2018, 7A, and that is Roman number 2. November 2018, question 7A, Roman number 2. Now, in this case, it is bringing us to what we call the causes of inflation. Now, in this case, we normally use two models that cause inflation. And number one is what we call the demandful inflation. And then number two is what we call the cost push inflation. The demandful inflation, and number two is what we call the cost push inflation. Now, let's first illustrate what we mean when we talk about the demandful inflation. What we mean when we talk about the demandful inflation. Let's first talk about that. The demandful inflation. Now, demandful inflation, in this case, I can have that is P. In this case, I can have what we call the QE1. This is QE. Then we have what we call in the QE1. QE1. Remember, these are demand, and then in this case, we also have what we call the supply in that case. So when you talk about the demandful inflation, this occurs when the aggregate demand persistently exceeds the aggregate supply, the aggregate demand in this case persistently exceeds the aggregate supply at the current prices. What do we mean in this case? Now, the current prices in this case they are PE. That is the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So as a result of that, the aggregate demand, the price here, this is the price, this is the quantity. At the end of it, the price in this case is exceeding what? Is exceeding the aggregate what? The aggregate supply. Which in this case, when we talk about the supply, in this case is this line. So as at the end of it, in this case, the price of that is going to increase. So the price is going to surpass, or in this case is going to exceed, let me use the word, the exceed, is going to exceed the normal price, which is PE, equal PE2. That is what we call the demand full inflation. Now, in this case, it may be caused by the following. It may be caused by the following. That is the causes of demand full inflation. Number one, right? Causes of demand full inflation. Number one, causes of demand full inflation. That is the question that you are required in Roman number what? Roman number, that is in Roman number, that's on November 2018, Roman number 3. 3 causes of demand full inflation in an economy. Number one, an increase in the level, an increase in the level of demand for goods and services, an increase in the level of demand, an increase in the level of demand of goods and services in a situation of near full employment. Demand for goods and services in a situation of near full employment. Number two, a general shortage of goods and services. A general shortage of goods and services. A general shortage of goods and services. In times of disasters, such as earthquakes and floods. Another one, social evils, social evils, which causes artificial shortages. Social evils which causes artificial shortages when prices goes up. The social evils that we are talking about in this case is what we call the smuggling. So what is smuggling? Smuggling in this case normally happen mostly unazipatanga in what we call the money laundering. Are we together? Do you know what is money laundering? Money laundering in this case is whereby you are trying to clean the dirty money. So in this case, when we talk about the money laundering, there is what we call the smuggling. Smuggling, this is whereby once you get the illegal money, you give it to other people so that they may be depositing that money at different times. So those people that are going to be depositing those money, we normally call them the smugglers or smugs. You can talk of them as smugglers or what we call the smugs. They will be depositing those money at different proportion of time to your account. That is what you mean in that regard. Then the other one, the expansion of government spending by borrowing. The expansion of the government spending by borrowing from the banking systems, when it is not matched by an increase in output. When it is not matched by an increase in output. And then the last one, a country trying to achieve an export surplus. A country trying to achieve, a country trying to achieve an export surplus because exports generate income at home. Because exports generate income at home. Now, the cost number 2, what we call the cost push inflation. Cost push inflation. Now, this one is whereby an increase in cost of production pushes the general prices up. An increase in cost of production. So in this case, when we talk of this, we normally relate it to demand. So here we have what we call the cost of production. Cost of production. And then in that case also I can have what we call the cost of production. And remember in this case when we talk about that, it compares to the prices in the cost of production. Then we have what we call the quantity. Now, we can pass up the demand. One, this is now what we equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. That is the PE one. Then in this case is QE1. So what we mean in this case for the demand pool, or the demand, I mean the cost pool, the cost push inflation. This is whereby the increase in the cost of production will push the general prices up. This type of inflation arises on the supply side or on the cost side of the market, and therefore the cost push inflation is caused by the following. Number one, an increase in wage costs. When higher wages are paid without corresponding increase in production, a rise in import prices, such as the prices of crude oil, leading to escalating prices throughout the economy. An increase in indirect taxation, which is imposed by the government, and also the changes in exchange rates, and also the structured rigidity. The structured in rigidity. Now, we also have another question here. We also have another question here. Which is asking about the effects of inflation. The effects of inflation. That is from May 2018. Question number 1. May 2018, question number 1. Yeah, for this, the rest of these process, I'm saying you will get them from the app. The app is still having the notes for each and every topic. So once you subscribe from the app, in that case, you'll be able to see what. You'll also be able to see all those notes. Now, inflation. May 2018, that is question number 1A. May 2018, question 1A. You are required to discuss 5 negative effects of inflation in an economy. The effects of inflation in an economy. Number one, we have in case of hyperinflation. Number one, the effects of inflation in an economy. Effects of inflation in an economy. Effects, that is the negative effects of inflation on the economy. Number one, saying in case of hyperinflation, in case of hyperinflation, case of hyperinflation, in case of hyperinflation, the public may lose confidence. Public may lose confidence in the domestic currency. Public may lose confidence in the domestic currency, and they may prefer lost confidence, in the domestic currency, and they may prefer to own its assets, in other currencies, in other currencies. The other one, the other one. Inflation may deter economic growth. Inflation may deter economic growth, because of increased uncertainty, One, it discourages savings through savings, through low real interest rates. Through low real interest rates. Then also another one. It deters investments. That is another one. Deters investments, especially with long gestation periods. The other one, loss of purchasing power of money. Loss of purchasing power of money. Loss of purchasing power of money. Now one is political unrest. As the population is unable to afford the basic necessities. The population is unable to afford the basic necessities. The other one, creditors may make losses when they give loans. Which the loans may not be paid back, Then the other one, to may cause the disequilibrium in the balance of payments, may cause disequilibrium in balance of payments, may cause disequilibrium in balance of payments, where inflation may mean goods produced domestically, where inflation may mean goods produced domestically are not affordable in the foreign markets, not affordable in the foreign markets, not affordable in the foreign markets, meaning exports will fall while imports will rise. Meaning exports will fall while imports will rise. That is what we mean when we talk about the effects of inflation. Also, you will also be able to check on the measures to combat inflation, especially on demand pull and also the cost pull, how an organization or our country in this case can be able to combat it. The country now can be able to combat inflation. Now we also have what we call the international trade. We have what we call the international trade and finance. That is also another topic, international trade and finance. International trade and finance. National trade and finance. Now this is whereby we will now be able to understand what we mean when we talk about the balance of payments. Now, when we talk about the balance of payments in this case, this is whereby the receipts in from foreign countries, or in this case, it's just the difference between the receipts from the foreign countries and also the payments in what? That country. That is what we mean when we talk about the balance of payments. So when we talk about international trade, in this case, it's just the trade between what? The trade between many countries all over the world. So in that case, you will check on the advantages for international trade, which in this case, advantages for national trade, you will check on that. Yeah, advantages for national trade. You will also check on that they are still on the notes, as I've said. Also, the disadvantages of the international trade, which in that case, this is whereby we also have what? We also call them the limitations of international trade. Yeah, and then again, you will also check on what we call there is what we call, yeah, this one I can talk about. We have what we call the theories of international trade. We talk about that. Theories of international trade. Theories of international trade. Theories of international trade. In this case, we have two theories of international trade. International theories of international trade. Now, the theories of international trade in these cases, I've said, there are in two. Number one, we have the theory of absolute advantage, theory of absolute advantage, advantage. This one was developed by someone by the name Adam Smith. Then number two, we have the theory of comparative. Theory of comparative advantage. That is theory of comparative advantage. We have the theory of comparative advantage. Advantage. This one was developed by David Ricardo. The David Ricardo. Now, when we talk about for the theory of absolute advantage, this one was developed by what we call the Adam Smith. He said that a country is said to have an absolute advantage in production of commodity if it can produce commodity more efficiently than another country. If it can produce commodities more efficiently than other countries. What we mean in this case, when we talk about more efficiently is using the lower cost. Lower cost. And therefore, if a country in that case is that country is said to be experiencing what we call the absolute advantage. In this case, it will produce those commodities at efficient or more efficiently. That is generally at lower cost than any other country. That is what he meant on that regard. Now, so for him, Smith also argued that the value of goods is proportional, or he argued that the value of goods is proportional to the amount of labor that is being employed. Value of goods that is being produced is equal to the value of labor that is being employed on that case. And therefore, that is what we mean on that theory of absolute advantage. Then we also have the comparative advantage theory, which was developed by David Ricardo. David Ricardo believed that two countries can still gain even if one country is more productive than what other in the lines of production. So in this case, he said that a country has a comparative advantage if it can produce something at the lower cost other than what the other country. However, in this case, it works on the assumption that only two countries are involved in the international trade, and only two commodities are traded in the international trade. No transport costs of goods traded between the two countries, and no barriers of trade, and there is free factor mobility to the factor resources, or the mobility of resources in production. Then also, we also have what we call the protection in finance. Generally, when we talk about protection in finance, in this case, is whereby we're talking about the trade wars, trade restrictions, protectionalism in finance. Protection in finance, this is what we call, that is protectionalism. Protectionalism. Now, when we talk about protectionalism or protection in finance, this is a form of obstacle to international trade. There are protective restrictions that are normally imposed with an objective of what? Protecting the infant industries. Now, How will a country protect the infant industries? When you talk about the infant industries, we are talking about those industries that are growing. Are we together? So how will they protect them? How will they protect them? One of it is through imposition of what? Custom duty. And the custom duty, this is generally on what? On the imports. This is whereby we have in the tariff. If the government in this case makes the import expensive, manager the people are not going to buy the goods, they are not going to import those goods. They will just buy the locally manufactured goods. Manage in that case it will help the growth of small industry. Then number two also is also correcting the balance of payment, correcting the balance of payment. Now, what I mean in this case, when we talk about the balance of payments I've said is just the difference between the receipts from other countries and the payments to the other country. What you are paying out to other countries and what you are receiving from those countries. That is what we mean when we talk about the balance of payment. So in this case, we find that the receipts maybe they are less than what you are paying out. Are we together? And therefore, at the end of it, you have to correct it. You have to correct what we call in the what? Generally, the imbalance. Where the receipts in this case, the payments are less than receipts, or receipts are more than the payment. You have to balance on that case. Now, the other one, they will also include what we call the what? What we call the quotas. The quotas in this case mean whereby there is just a physical restriction imposed on volumes of goods which are being what? Volumes of goods that are being imported. Kind of goods that normally import goods. Whereby in that case the government will restrict the size of goods that you are supposed, or the volume of goods that you are supposed to import in a given country. Sawa. And as a result of that, kumaanisha kama wameimpose such a restriction, then in that case it will lead to growth of the other the infant industries. Now we also have the subsidies. Now we see that in this case, when the government imposes subsidies, they are just making the what? The locally manufactured good what? And as a result of that, in this case, we'll also be able to increase what? Or make those small country to grow. Then we also have what we call the control of foreign control or foreign exchange or foreign currency. Control of foreign currency. Control of foreign currency. Now, this is whereby the government will make it hard for the people to exchange currencies, whereby in that case they may make the imports difficult in the exchange of the currencies in that regard. So we mean the government makes it hard for people to access foreign exchange, making the imports what? Difficult. And the other one also, they can impose what we call the administrative what? Administrative controls. Administrative controls. The administrative controls. This is whereby the government may make it hard for selling goods to particular countries. Ama wanasema zingine hamna uziwa. You're not supposed to import some of the goods in other particular country. That is what we mean in this case. Now, there is this question. This question of May 2018. May 2018. That is question number 2B. May 2018 question 2B. May 2018 question 2B. May 2018 question 2B. You are required reasons why. Reasons why. Reasons why a country might impose the national trade restrictions. Reasons why companies may impose international trade restrictions. So why will a country impose international trade restrictions? Or what we call it the protectionism. The protectionism. Number one is the protection of infant what? Protection of infant industries. Protection of infant industries. Protection of infant industries. Another one, to correct the balance of payments deficits. Correct the balance of payments. The balance of payments deficits. When you talk about the balance of payment deficit, this is whereby you find that the payments are more than what receipts in a given country. And therefore, in that case, you can do that by imposing that. The other one, number 3, is to raise the government revenue. To raise the government revenue. The other one is to discourage dumping of goods. The discourage dumping of goods. When we talk of the dumping in this case may exist or whereby, or it may be a situation whereby the prices of a good in a domestic country, or in this case, in a domestic company is higher than in the foreign currency. So unapata in foreign ndio iko lower. Are we together? Yeah. That is what we mean in that case. So in that case, it will discourage what we call the dumping of goods. To protect strategic industries, there is another one. To protect strategic industries, and the last one is for economic recovery. Economic recovery. For economic recovery. For economic recovery. That is what we mean in that case. Now, that is what we mean when we talk about that. So that is on that part of the protectionalism. Now, we've been talking about what we call the balance of payments. Balance of payments. The balance of payments. So when we talk about the balance of payments, in these cases, I kept on saying, it's just the difference between the receipts from other countries and the payment to other countries. So what you are receiving and what you are paying out to other countries. So in this case, you may find that there is what we call the balance of payment deficits. Balance of payment deficits in this case will arise whereby the payments, what you are paying to other countries is more than what you are receiving in that country. So, another question may ask you, what may cause the balance of payments deficits in developing countries? what may cause the balance of payments deficit in developing countries. Yes, what may cause the balance of payments in developing countries. So the causes of balance of payments in this case, the causes of balance of payments, deficits, balance of payment deficits. Now, we have what we call, first we have what we call the balance of trade. Balance of trade. Now, when we talk about the balance of trade in this case, this is the difference between the physical export and also the physical what? Imports. In other, on the other, this is just generally what we mean in this case is the difference between the imports and exports. And generally what we mean in this case, we're talking about the physical what? Physical imports and what? That is what we mean when we talk about the balance of trade. Now, the balance of payment in this case is having these two components. Component number one is what we call in the current account. We have the current account and then we have what we call the capital account. Now, when we talk about the current account in this case, it shows the balance of payment between the export and the import of fireable and invisible, of visible and invisible items during the particular year. But for the capital in this case involves the long-term payment, either inwards or outwards, which in this case may include the foreign loans and also what we call in the government loan, the grants. Now, then what I was talking about is now on the causes of balance of payment deficit. Causes of balance of payment deficit. So in this case, you can talk of them as causes of disequilibrium. Disequilibrium in balance of payment. And one of it is unfavorable terms of trade of primary products. One of which, number one, and this is a question in the sitting of May 2017. In the sitting of May 2017, question number 7A. May 2017, question 7A. May 2017, question 7F. May 2017, 7F. The four causes of balance of payment deficits in developing countries. One of it is, as I've said, is unfavorable terms of trade of primary products, unfavorable terms of trade of primary products. Number two is a shortage of capital. Shortage of capital. Increased imports, that is number three. Increased imports. Natural policies. Natural calamities, I mean. Natural calamities. Then we have the devaluation policy. Devaluation policy. When you talk about devaluation, this is whereby you are lowering the value of a domestic currency against any acceptable foreign currency. Then we also have the other one, we have the capital flight. capital flight. This is whereby large volumes of capital may be withdrawn or moved from a country, which in that case may result to balance of payment deficit. Then the other one, how many are those? They are supposed to be, yeah, 6. So those are the balance of payments deficits in developing countries. Now, the question number B there is asking about the limitations of the theory of comparative advantage. And then the theory of comparative advantage on the international, that is one of the theory of international trade. It's just on the assumptions. One of the assumptions they was assuming that they are not transport costs. Only two countries are only, it was talking about only two types of products, or two countries are involved in international trade. Only two commodities or products are traded in the international trade. He also assumes that no barriers of trade or free factor to free factor to mobility. That is what we mean in that regard. So just in that case, the limitations are also the assumptions, which is just the same as what I've written there in the assumptions. Now, we have what we're talking about. What, so at one time we'll also check on what we call it the methods of curing the unfavorable words. How the government in this case can be able to do, or how a country in this case can be able to cure the unfavorable balance of payment or deficits in that regard. So I've talked about what we call the devaluation and what we call there is devaluation and what we call the depreciation, and this is generally on currency. So when we talk about the currency devaluation, which in this case is a question, this case is a question that was asked in the sitting of November 2019, question number 7C. Required to distinguish between depreciation of a currency and a demonetization of a currency. Demonetization of a currency. Difference between the valuation of a currency, depreciation of a currency and demonetization of currency. Now, when you talk about demonetization, you can also refer it to as what we call the depreciation, devaluation of a currency. Where in this case, devaluation is a deliberate lowering of the value of a domestic currency against any acceptable foreign currency. So in this case, there is also what we call in the depreciation of currency. When we talk about the currency depreciation, in this case, it will occur if there is what we call high demand for goods and services by a country. So in this case, there will be high demand for the domestic currency by foreigners to enable them to purchase what we call the goods produced by that country, or demand for that good is a bit worse, is a bit high. So you can point and say depreciation of a currency, depreciation of a currency, depreciation of a currency may occur if there is high demand for goods and services. There is high demand for goods and services. Goods and services by a country, in which it will lead to higher demand for domestic currency by foreigners, which it will lead to higher demand for domestic for domestic, for domestic currency by foreigners to enable them, purchase the goods that are being produced, goods that are produced by that country, whose demand for its products is high, which enables them or to enable them to purchase goods produced by that country whose demand for its products is high. Whose demand for its products is high. Same currency demonetization or demonetization or devaluation is a deliberate lowering of the value of domestic currency. Is deliberate lowering of the value of the domestic currency against any acceptable foreign currency. Against any acceptable foreign currency. This is to improve the terms of trade and correcting. This is to improve the terms of trade. This is to improve the terms of trade and correct the unfavorable balance of payments. Correct the unfavorable balance of payments. Now, you are required the possible effects of the demonetization of the currency, which is also the inflation. One of it is the effects of demonetization or devaluation. Effects of demonetization or devaluation. One of it you say effects of demonetization or devaluation. One you say they lead to increase exports, higher prices for imported items, higher prices for imported items, higher prices for imported items, a reduction in imports, capital flights, looking about these flights, capital flights, where in this case, when we talk about the capital flight, this is whereby investors may take their money to other countries. Then the terms of say the terms of trade will be unfavorable. Terms of trade will be unfavorable. Terms of trade will be unfavorable. So that is what we mean when we talk about that. So now, there is also what we call the regional economic integration. When we talk of economic integration, in this case, is the process or state of affairs which is designed to abolish what we call discrimination between economic units belonging to different national states. So in that case, you check on the types of economic integration, and after that, we'll also check on what we call the arguments for economic grouping, and also the arguments against, which is also the limitations against that. We also check on what we call the international institutions, whereby in that case, that is whereby you talk of what we call the International Monetary Fund. Sasa tumeshinda kufuatilia hapa. So in that case, when we talk about the International Monetary Fund, the National Monetary Fund is now what we're talking about the IMF.